I come from a small town in the Midwest called Ponca City, Oklahoma. I also grew up primarily in poverty. I've eaten out of trash bins. I've been a single mother, putting myself through university all alone. I'm also autistic and ADHD. And those were actually the most challenging things to deal with in my entire life. I've been ostracized, excluded, and nearly ended my life 3 times. But I am here today, standing in front of you on this TEDx stage, not just because of the steps that I have taken, but more importantly, because of the steps that others took with me when I needed them and help the most. I call those bilateral steps because many times in life, our steps aren't enough and we need help. I'm going to tell you about that today and about how these types of bilateral steps are important to people like myself who are autistic and ADHD, or you'll hear me mention the term neuro-minorities. And I hope by the end of this presentation that you will be inspired to take one of these steps. So I'll start with telling you a little bit about myself. Then we'll talk about what I mean by a bilateral step, what I mean by neuro-minorities. Then we'll have a real-life example, and I'll end with an introduction to what neurodiversity is. I discovered that I was autistic late in life. It was empowering for me because for the first time in my life, I understood why I was different and that being different was okay. But that powerful, positive time for me was actually overshadowed by how people started treating me. Once I started to disclose to others that I was autistic, I was surprised at how I was treated. I was treated with prejudice. I was treated with fear. I was even treated with disgust. And some of these people were family and friends, people I had known most of my life. Those reactions were not justified. They were actually reactions based on stereotypes and misinformation. But unfortunately, what people understand of things like autism and ADHD, so often it's incorrect based on stereotypes. Those things are embedded deeply within our society. I knew I needed to help. One of the first things I did was start an autistic support group for adults in Dubai. Now I use my professional experience for things like corporate governance, strategy, program design, and training to help organizations become more inclusive to people like myself, neuro-minorities. Throughout all of these experiences, this notion of bilateral steps has time and time again come before me as being incredibly important. What do I mean by bilateral steps? We're going to use our imaginations to walk through an analogy of what a bilateral step is. Imagine life as a map in front of you. And that map has different roadways and pathways, either go closer to our goals and our destination or farther away. And either way, we have to make steps. Let's think of the obstacles that we face in life as gates. We walk along a path and we reach a gate. Then when we do at a gate, we have to work harder to get past it. But sometimes, no matter how hard you work in life, you can't get past that gate yourself. It's especially true for anybody who belongs to a minority category. Because what happens is we find ourselves stuck at the gate, but yet we're watching others pass through easily. Those of us who are neuro-minorities, we need your steps to open those gates. A neuro-minority is a group of individuals that all share a common neurological style. And that common neurological style diverges significantly from what's considered typical or normal. This term normal is not a great word to use. It's not a great concept because it's not reliable. People think this idea of normal is somehow backed with scientific fact, but it's not. What is considered normal is created by society. It's unreliable because this idea of normal, it changes. It changes over time. It's subjective. It changes between generations. It's different across cultures. And what happens when you use this ideal of normal to judge others? For those of us who are neuro-minorities, we find we're excluded because we think differently. We communicate differently. We learn differently. We even experience the world around us differently. Being excluded has real life effects on us. We have difficulty accessing education, employment, and even healthcare. And there are likely more of us out there than you know. Let me give you a few examples of neuro-minority groups. Neuro-minorities. I bet you haven't heard of all of these. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Noelle, why are we talking about these? How do you even say dyscalculia? I've never heard of this. How many people in the world could possibly be a neuro-minority? We think approximately 20% of the humans on this planet are a neuro-minority. They belong to either one or more of those groups that we just saw. That's 1.6 billion people. 30 to 40% of us are unemployed. One of the biggest stereotypes that we have in society today is that people who are autistic and ADHD, people mistake them for having an intellectual disability. You can be autistic and ADHD and have any kind of intelligence, abilities, and skills. These are separate things. But because society believes them, it impacts us. A recent UK study, autistic students 10 times more likely to drop out of university. Again, not because they intellectually are unable, but because they're ostracized by other students and faculty and staff, because there's a lack of understanding, a lack of accommodations, a lack of support, a lack of acceptance and inclusion. A Danish study found that autistics are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of suicide compared to the general population. It has the highest suicide rate than any other disability group. Let's take a real life example. A few years ago, a friend of mine reconnected with me out of the blue to tell me that he was autistic as well. He had just gotten diagnosed. Despite the fact that we had so many of the same obstacles in life, that we come from poverty, that we come from a poor economic area, that we were both autistic, that our lives diverged. He was incredibly depressed. He was incredibly lonely, and he was still living in poverty. And my life had gone the opposite way. There was one clear reason why, and that is, at key points in my life, somebody stepped up and opened a gate for me. I'll give you a work example. In my early career, I was an information security analyst. I loved it. It gave me such a sense of accomplishment and worth, and I was good at it. But what I wasn't good at was socializing. Much of our success in the workplace isn't about doing the actual job. It's about how well you maneuver that social environment. And in fact, as an analyst, my performance was tied to how my teammates liked me, how social I was, how many networking events I could go to. It wasn't necessary for the job. My boss saw this and he opened a gate for me. He took somebody who was naturally quiet and shy and made her present to a very large group of executives on a monthly basis for 45 minutes. I did that for 18 months. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not only did it give me a way to get exposure to individuals that I couldn't get exposure to because I couldn't socialize and network, it gave me a way to connect with others that I also couldn't do through socialization and networking. It not only saved my job, it made a career. My friend, he didn't have the same experience. Nobody was opening a gate for him. What happened? That brilliant, funny, kind man became a statistic. He died by suicide. This is a real impact of taking groups of people and pushing them out of society. I hope this encourages you and lets you know the importance of your steps. Because when you do a bilateral step, you not only help that individual, it helps all of us. In order to explain that to you, I want to introduce you to neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a term that was originally coined by Judy Singer, an Australian sociologist in the 1990s. It's also a term that is often used incorrectly. Neurodiversity refers to the immense variation of human minds and human neurology that we have as a human population. To help you understand that further, you can think of neurodiversity as being a subset of biodiversity. Biodiversity refers to the diversity of species in an ecosystem, and it follows the principle that the more diversity, the more species within a given ecosystem, the more stable, adaptable, and sustainable that ecosystem or our planet is. Just as biodiversity contributes to successful and flourishing ecosystems, neurodiversity contributes to the richness, to the complexity of our humanity, of who we are. Neurodiversity makes us collectively more innovative, better problem solvers, and more adaptable to change, which is absolutely essential if you think about the big issues that we're dealing with in the future, like climate change. When you take out and carve off a group of people because they don't fit into this subjective box called normal, you reduce diversity. We become weaker, not stronger. When you take a bilateral step, that's a step that doesn't just help an individual, it helps us all. The neurodiversity movement is to improve civil rights and full social inclusion for those who are neuro-minorities. And we need you. We need your steps. Every single one of you has power, and I am living proof of that. I am here standing in front of you instead of dead in a box because certain individuals stood up with me, took a step with me, opened a gate for me. Many of you are university students. As you graduate and you move on to the next stage of your life, you're going to find these opportunities to take a bilateral step, and they're going to be very unique to you. Imagine if everyone who is listening to this talk today were to take one bilateral step in their lifetime, just one. Imagine how many lives could be touched. Imagine us collectively, all of our steps, how we can change the world for the better, one bilateral step at a time.